everybody, it's Josh Alexander from Orange County Housing Market News. If this is the first time you're tuning into this show is all about Orange County real estate. So I go over local trends happening in the market, interview experts in the field, and then I also go over some tricks, tips, and advice for both buyers and sellers. So if you are thinking of buying or selling a home in the near future, this is a great place to start. So on today's episode, I'm going to be discussing one of the two most recent bills that was just passed last week in California that specifically impacts housing. I'm talking about SB9 and SB10. So SB9 is the one I'm going to go over today because that seems to be the more controversial one. So I want to go over some of the details, what to expect, the pros and cons of this new bill, and how that's going to impact you as a homeowner or someone that is thinking of buying a home in the near future. So let's go ahead and get into it. So to break down the changes as simple as possible, SB9, really what it did was it changed the definition of single-family residential zoning. So before, where you had one lot, you had one house on it, and you might be able to build one additional granny flat or ADU, depending on what you want to call it, a smaller home in the back. That's really the extent of what you can do on a single lot. However, we are now looking at changes that are happening because of this SB9. So what is happening now is that single lot can now be split up into two separate lots. And on each of those lots, you can have up to 2 properties each for a total of up to 4 properties on each individual lot. So there's going to be a lot of different stringent guidelines you have to follow to be able to do this, as well as a lot of restrictions. So what I did was I broke down this law into the 12 most important facts to know about it, to be able to give you a really good idea of when you can do this, when you can't do this, what type of homes qualify for this, and what the process looks like. So just like any law, there's going to be a lot of fine print, so you want to make sure if you're thinking of doing this or buying a property to be able to do this, you want to make sure that you go through and read exactly what is in this fine print. But in general, these are the 12 most important things that you're going to need to know about this new law to be able to kind of get yourself up and running and at least understand the basics of what qualifies, what doesn't qualify, and how this whole thing works. So let's go ahead and go over those 12 points now. Okay, so number 1 is the lot or house can't be located in a high fire zone, a historic district, or be a historic home itself. Number 2, the lot must be at least 2,400 square feet large. So if it's smaller than that, it's not going to qualify. And then after you do a lot split, each lot needs to be at least 1,200 square feet each, or again, it won't qualify to be able to do this. And you also need to be having those 2 lots roughly around the same size, at most a 60-40 split. And so basically you need to make sure that those lots are about the same size. You don't have one house taking up 90% of the lot and then trying to squeeze in another 2 houses in the extra 10%. So the next one is that it can't require the demolition or alteration of housing serving moderate, low, or very low income households or a rent-controlled unit. And this is basically in there to make sure that we're not eliminating any more low-income housing than we have to, because we already have a lack of that in the state. So this is there to make sure that we're not taking that away from anybody else. The next one is you can't split the lot if it requires demolition or alteration of housing occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years. And this one is huge. We'll get into that in a little bit. But this just basically means if it's used as a rental, you can't do this right now. So the next one is the applicant must intend to occupy one of the housing units as their principal or primary residence for a minimum of 3 years from the date of the approval of the lot split. And again, this is going to have some huge impacts, and again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the next one is it can't be used for a short-term rental. So you can't Airbnb these properties and try to make money that way off of them. The rent has to be for at least 30 days. And this is just prevent traffic going in and out of the property all the time and keeping those residential streets at least as clear as possible. Next one, can't be used for office or retail space. So it has to be used to actually house someone. You can't be using it for a business. Next one is that any development or modification to a property must conform with the look and the feel of the current home and must adhere to the objective zoning and design standards established by your local city and county. So this is just to make sure that the homes that are being built are not going to look completely out of place and become an eyesore in the neighborhood. Next one, local agencies can require the owner to add 1 parking spot for each unit built if it isn't within a half a mile of a major public transit stop. And lastly, local government officials may only deny a development application if they find that the proposed project would have a specific adverse impact on public health and safety or the physical environment, and there are no feasible and satisfactory mitigation options. So this, as well as some of the other ones, are saying that really you just need to make sure that you're being in very close contact with your local city and county to make sure that the requirements that they're asking for are being met when you decide to build these properties. There's not a lot of guidance out city by city yet because this was just introduced and passed, but I anticipate over the next couple months we'll start to get more details, and especially as we roll into next year, because this doesn't go into effect until January 1st. I expect to get some more guidance by city and by county in terms of what you can and what you can't do to make the requirements a little clearer. Right now, which is kind of ambiguous because these local requirements might change city to city and county to county. So let's go ahead and look at some of the information surrounding this and what we expect to see when this law does go into effect on January 1st. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the pros first. And there's really 2 big pros to this law. So the first one being that yes, the law was written to try to increase inventory in California because right now we have an affordability crisis. Especially over the last year, appreciation has gone crazy in California, anywhere from 15 to 20% appreciation in just 1 year in California, which is making it harder and harder for low and middle income households to be able to afford a place to live and be able to also buy the other essentials they need to get as they live here. So this law was put into place to try to alleviate that. Now, UC Berkeley just came out with a study, and I'll have a link to the study below, so feel free to check it out because it's got some great information in there. And they're estimating over the next couple years, we can expect this to increase inventory in California by a little over 700,000 homes. Now, is that going to actually happen? It's hard to say, but after they looked at it and kind of determined which homes would qualify to do this and then which homes would actually do this, you're looking at right around 700,000 homes. Now, again, we're anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 million homes underbuilt in California, so this by no means eliminates the housing problem that we're having, but it does put a little bit of a dent in it, and it will help slow down appreciation and make it more affordable to live in California. So that's one of the pros. So the other big pro that I see with this law is actually for the homeowners that have those lots that are able to be split and you can build property on, and those homeowners that have the means and want to go through the process of permitting, building, and then going through and finding renters for these properties, because it will be a decent amount of passive income they can get from these properties every single month that is going to help pay their own mortgage down and maybe even some more money on top of that. So they're actually making money by having these additional units on their properties. Some homeowners will want to go through that process, but it is a very daunting process. It takes a long time. There's a lot of money involved. So there is going to be some hurdles to get through to be able to do something like this. But like I said, the other pro is going to be that those homeowners that want to go through that are going to have some ability to make some additional income as long as they're comfortable living in the same place as the other properties that they're renting out. So this is a great strategy for those people that are looking to house hack, which basically means that they buy a property, live in one unit, and then rent out the other units to be able to help cover their mortgage, so they pay either no mortgage or very little mortgage, and it helps them get into the home ownership game, and it's a little bit easier to do than having to come up with the entire amount yourself and having to pay that mortgage yourself. So this is kind of an additional strategy that those people that are looking at the house hack, which traditionally they bought maybe a duplex, lived in one, rented out the other. Now they're able to buy a home and either build these properties, or if the properties have already been built by a past owner, they're going to be able to take advantage of that and be able to buy a property and then have 3 additional units or up to 3 additional units of income coming in to be able to help offset their mortgage. So this could be helpful for a lot of those people looking to get into home ownership, just don't quite have the means of being able to pay for their monthly mortgage, but still want to be able to get all the advantages and tax advantages of actually owning a house. Okay, so now I want to talk about the cons, because there's definitely some valid concerns that homeowners have out there about what this new law might do to their neighborhood and what it really means for them. But at the same time, there's also a lot of misinformation out there right now about this new law and what it might do to neighborhoods. So I want to talk a little bit about both and hopefully provide some clarity so you know a better idea of what to expect next year and realistically what is going to happen in your neighborhood when this law goes into effect. So the first thing that I hear from homeowners when I discuss this new law is that, great, I'm gonna have a bunch of developers, a bunch of investors come into my neighborhood, snatch up a bunch of houses, tear them down, turn them into 4 rental units, and now I have a bunch of traffic on my street, I can't park, and I'm not gonna know my neighbors anymore. That really is something that a lot of homeowners are worried about. Now, the way the law was written, they really put 2 specific things in the law to prevent the majority of this happening in most neighborhoods. So I just want to go over those 2 specific things with you and kind of show you how I don't think that it's really going to impact your neighborhood how some people might think because of the way they wrote this law. Okay, so let's look at the landlord side first. So let's say you have a home in your neighborhood that someone owns, that they're renting it out to someone right now. Well, just by them renting it to someone, it automatically disqualifies them from this new program, because the law states that if that property has been a rental any time in the last 3 years, that they do not qualify to take advantage of this new law to be able to split the property and put more units on it. So that really takes away a lot of those landlords that might say, hey, I want to turn this property into 4 and increase my income. They wrote it in a way that really eliminates those landlords from doing that. So on the developer side, there's another section of the law that I talked about earlier that's going to prevent a lot of developers from wanting to go through and do something like this. And that is that if you own the property, you have to live in the property for 3 years after you do the split. So there's not a lot of developers out there that are going to take the time to live in the house for 3 years after they split it up just to get the additional units built into the property. It's just not financially feasible for most of these developers. So that's really going to eliminate most of the investors and developers from being able to come into your neighborhood, snatch up properties, turn them to rentals, and create a bunch of traffic and problems. The way the law was written was to prevent that. They want to keep this focused on homeowners that own their home, that haven't rented it out before, and it's just an additional way for them to increase their own income to be able to offset their mortgage or even a little bit extra on top of that, at the same time providing housing for more people in the area. So now let's actually look at those homeowners that this law was written for and really what this means for them in terms of how financially feasible something like this would be under this new law. So let's say you do have a homeowner that's looking at this new law and says, hey, it might be a good idea for me to have 1 or 2 more units on my property. I can offset my mortgage, create some additional income, and it would be able to provide some housing for somebody else. Now, there's 2 big reasons why most homeowners are not going to want to do this. One is the financial cost. Building a separate unit on your property is not cheap, especially in Southern California. Most ADUs are going to cost anywhere from a minimum $150,000 and up. So you're looking at a lot of financial investment to be able to get a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th home on your property. And so a lot of homeowners just don't have the financial means to do that, or don't want to draw all the equity out of their house to get a loan to be able to do that. So it's not going to appeal to a large majority of homeowners. So now let's look at the second reason I don't think you're going to have a lot of homeowners taking full advantage of this new law that comes out. And that has to do with space. So in Orange County, homes tend to be a little bit closer together than some of the other cities that are spread out. So you really don't have a lot of space on your lot. And typically, your house is going to be pretty close to centered in the middle of your lot. So you have a little bit of front yard, a little bit of backyard. A lot of homes just don't have the room, even though their lot size might qualify. They just don't have the room to be able to put 3 additional units in their backyard and still have any usable space whatsoever. So that's really going to prevent a lot of homeowners from wanting to tackle this to begin with. Yes, some homeowners might put maybe 1 unit back there, but that's already been allowed for a very long time in California, and the laws around a single ADU have been a lot more laxed over the last couple years, and you really haven't seen a giant increase of those units being built. And that kind of brings me to my final point, and this goes back to that UC Berkeley study that was done about this law and the impact that it might have on neighborhoods. So again, the link is below. I encourage you to check it out. It has a lot of great information in there. And if you remember at the beginning of this episode, I let you know that their estimates put it right around 700,000 homes in all of California that could be built because of this new law. But they also talk about the feasibility of it and why this is really not going to impact neighborhoods. So they go through and they analyze that the lot sizes in California, who might be financially able to do this as well as have the space to do this. And they came out with basically saying that only 5.4% of all single family homes in California would even have the ability to be able to put additional units on their lot. And that equals right about 410,000 homes. So out of those 410,000 homes, 300,000 of those homes already qualify to be able to build an ADU on their property, a single ADU, and only about 110,000 homes are actually going to be able to newly be qualified to be able to build additional units on their property, which is why this is really, as a whole of California, not going to impact one specific neighborhood so significantly where you're going to see a giant inflow of traffic in your streets and be able to really start blocking things up. So yes, you might have one house on your neighborhood that converts for 1 or 2 more ADUs than what they used to have, but this is not something you're going to see 50% of your homes in your neighborhood all of a sudden build 4 units and turn it into a condo-like complex. So it's just not going to happen with the way this new law is written. So I hope that kind of alleviates some of your fears on what might happen. So will there be some negative impact to homeowners when this new law takes effect next year? Unfortunately, yes. I'd love to be all sunshine and rainbows, but let you know, realistically, there are going to be a few homeowners that unfortunately live next to neighbors that fully qualify for this program to be able to put 3 additional units on their property, have the financial means to do so, have the space to do so, and decide they want to go through with the process to be able to create additional revenue and income for themselves to be able to use however they want to. However, I do think the net impact of this new law will create more housing, which will keep more Californians in California, help out with those low to medium income households, stay in the cities and the counties that they want to stay in to be able to get their kids in the good schools they want to go in and be close to work. And it is going to have a net positive impact on California. Now, is that a guarantee? No, we will have to see how this law plays out. But based on all the restrictions they put in here, I think there's a better chance that it's going to positively impact California than it will negatively impact. So if you do have any other questions about this specific law, please feel free to comment below. If you have any other questions that I haven't answered recently in my recent videos, also please let me know below because I love making new content and answering questions, so I would love to engage with you on that. Until next time, stay healthy, stay happy, and I'll see you on the next show. Bye.